one of my biggest passions is really helping people transition their careers. And normally, I'd like to think of everyone shows up at their job with their unique value. Each one of you is really unique, and I could just go on talking about that forever. But today, I'm going to be talking more about the transferable skills. And I am a huge believer that the skills that you build for life are just so much more important than the tools that you use. And because we are at a datacon, this is exceptionally true in the data space, where I myself have actually used some of these data skills to help transition my career from an engineer in oil and gas to building digital products in the financial industry now at ATB Financial. So my story starts in December 2020, where after a decade in the same company, I was laid off. But I was not alone because thousands more were let go in the following months. And you yourself may actually know someone that was let go around this time. But I would actually consider myself one of the lucky ones. I did survive 2 ups and downs, but the third time's a charm. But I just won't lie. It was like very stressful each time, every time one of these oil crashes hit. And after I was laid off with the number of jobs that were getting oil off the ground were becoming slim, I had to make a change in my career. And after that, the doors just opened up to me. So being an engineer, I naturally worked a lot with numbers and data. And there's a saying that data is the new oil. And it is just amazing how much data the world is amassing today. According to this article, there is 44 zettabytes of data, and that's like 21 zeros at the end of that. So it's just like this immense amount of data in the world, and there's just not enough people to make any sense of it all, which is why we're all here today at this DataCon. So when I decided to make that career pivot, I did a lot of my own self-upskilling to learn all the modern tools through Udemy. So growing up in a very frugal family, I did wait for all the sales to happen. Like, why pay $200 for a course when every second week Udemy seemed to have a sale for $13? And I just became addicted to learning. But not only did I want to learn, I also wanted to apply that through participating in datathons and doing my own projects. But when I was going through these, I actually just realized I had a lot of these skills all along in data. And that was all thanks to this tool, Excel. So for 10 years, I would literally open Excel every single day. And at my old company, Excel was like an engineer's Swiss Army knife. It was my programming language, a data visualization tool. I would create dashboards in it. It was even our database. I know it's definitely not good practice compared to modern day data governance, but that's what we did. And as the years went on, the data sets got larger, and so did our Excel files. And eventually these Excel files became these 20 worksheet giants with multiple linked files and computational power that rivals crypto mining just to get a simple analysis done. I liken Excel is like the Plymouth Voyager my dad let me drive in high school. It was not very efficient, it was extremely clunky, and was certainly not very cool considering my high school parking lot looked like something straight out of the Fast and the Furious. But it was very versatile. I was able to hold all my friends in there, and it got the job done. And because of this versatility, I was able to build the many data skills that I use today in product operations at ATB Financial. So begs the question, what are these skills? And throughout my career, I found that data is just not very useful unless you can connect data and people. And I've used these skills that have helped me in both oil and gas and now in banking. And these 3 skills are data literacy, data visualization, and data storytelling. And with these three skills, no matter what data job you have, these are the skills that you build for life. And these are the three that I will be exploring today. So, number one, data literacy. So, when you think about literacy into the traditional sense of language, you think of being able to read, to write, or to understand. But I'd say the most important data skill is questioning. And I know this was referenced in a talk from Danielle yesterday, where she just kept mentioning you just need to keep asking questions, and that means finding the experts and asking, these two questions here: where does the data come from, and what does it mean? When I worked in oil and gas, I realized that there was just so many different subdomains, from geoscience, drilling, operations. There's absolutely no way I could understand any of it. So when you think about your own areas and all the experts that you need to ask, and just so much data you just don't understand. So let's unpack these a little bit. So where does it come from means really trying to understand the circumstances of which the data is generated, or being able to trace the lineage of it. So how was the data formed or calculated? In oil and gas, a lot of our data was generated from faulty equipment. And asking this question allowed me to see if I could trust the data or just be a little wary of it. And what does it mean? So, this question you use like a filter because, like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, there is an immense amount of data today, and most of it is useless. And when you ask this question, you need to pick what you need. So, in the end, you're asking these questions because you want to be able to trust the data and represent it, and so that people can trust you. So, I want to challenge you all today. There's a lot of stats and data going around in news online. And every time something like this comes up, just question the validity of it and flex those data literacy skills. Number two, data visualization. One of the questions I often get is, Adrian, should I learn like Tableau or Power BI? And to me, this is like asking the question, should I learn how to drive on a Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla? So just because you know how to operate a car does not mean you actually know how to drive. And if you want any evidence of this, you just take a drive down to Deerfoot. Learning to drive means knowing good principles like the rules of the road, being able to anticipate hazards, changing lanes safely. Because if you don't do any of that, you crash your car and you're out a lot of money. Data visualization should also be focused on good principles, because if you don't, it can actually also cost you a lot of money as well. I actually learned this the hard way, where I was presenting a data that looked like not too different than what you see on the screen here to 20 people. And as I was explaining the data, here is probably what's going on through somebody's head when they're kind of reading through this. They're like, what does that y-axis mean? Like, I thought red meant this, but it means something else here. Is that blue or yellow pie bigger? Okay, I think I finally understand this chart, but what do I do with it? And whenever you see something like this, you may find yourself thinking the same thing and just ignoring what the other person is actually saying. So after I presented something like this, and I would flip over the next data set, a hand would always go up, and they would say, Adrian, can you go back? I did not get any of that. And as I looked around the room, apparently nobody did either. So I would flip back to the visualization, and everyone would just stare in awkward silence, just trying to digest this mosaic that I gave them. The rest of the time would repeat itself, and I would only get through about a third of the data. And I would need to book repeat one on ones with everyone just to explain what I was trying to say. And that amounted to probably thousands of dollars in lost time just because I couldn't visualize data properly. So, I have some tips for you in data visualization here. The first one is keeping it simple. And I have three charts here, and for the most part, these three charts or a variation of will cover the most cases that you want to tell in your story. If you want to correlate two measures, you can use a scatter plot. If you want to look at measures over time or distance, a line chart. Or if you're trying to compare numerical categories, a bar chart will do. There are tons of fancy visualizations out there, and they're often very fun, but more often than not, they can be conveyed better using probably one of these three. So the next time you just want to try something complex, just ask yourself, can I actually convey it using one of these three? I do want to give a shout out to Tanya yesterday, who did go over a lot of the chart type of geospatial data. And it is definitely a different beast altogether to try to use that as well. So the next step, number 2 tip, is be smart with color. And there are just two reasons that you should be using color in your visualizations. The first one is a pre-attentive attribute. And this is essentially trying to make what matters pop out. The second reason is using color as a third dimension. And you need to be a little bit wary of using this because when you're adding more dimensions to your visualizations, you're just adding more cognitive load to your reader. And the point of visualizations is to really try to streamline the data and make it digestible. Again, you should also think about the circumstances in which you're presenting your visualizations. If you're presenting stuff in a self-service insights on dashboard and the user has a little bit more time to digest it, then color as a third dimension is probably not a bad idea. However, if you're looking to tell a story in a very short amount of time, then you probably want to go with something like a pre-attentive attribute. Number 3, adding context. So in visualizations, there's often a lot of data to digest. And I like to think of your visualization as like the main course of a meal. It fills you up, but you just crave so much more. Context that you add is like the dessert. It just tops off your meal very nicely. So there are two types of context that you can add. The first one is observational context. So this is answering that question, what do you want your audience to actually see in the data? And this is your opportunity to highlight things like trends, anomalies, and patterns. And as you can see here in this example on the bottom left, that depending on the observational context you add, can really change what the people actually get out of the data. The second one is additive context. So you're adding new information to tell your story. And it's just amazing how just a small amount can add a huge punch. When you look at this visualization here, say, for example, bar charts, where, by themselves, the bar charts are all right. But adding a single goal there and the circumstances, you can actually just feel how much more emotional weight that this context can add. Number 4, decluttering your visualizations. Mary Kondo's right when she says, discard everything does this not spark joy. Growing up, I absolutely hated cleaning my room whenever my parents would tell me to. It was always tedious, boring, and I just wasn't sure why I needed to do that. And cleaning your visualizations is often a step that is skipped by many people. And it's necessary to add that same polish that my living room has now that I'm married. So you just need to be relentless with your visualizations, like anything from decimal places, axis labels, legends, markers, grid lines, and ask yourself, does it spark joy? You can see here in this example, along with the previous points of context and color, how your visualizations can absolutely transform through all these steps. So, going back to the question, what tool should I learn? And my advice is you just pick one of the tools and learn how to use it, but always practice good visualization principles because the tools will always change no matter where you go. But these principles that you learn will stay with you forever. Number 3, data storytelling. We all love data, but I have found that it can be a trap sometimes because we love it so much. And let me tell you a story on how I discovered this. Once I was mentoring an intern. Let's call him James. And he had a very high stakes presentation with a group of people. And let's call them the managers. Now, the managers were a group of people that you might get half an hour with once a year if you're lucky. And you can imagine for young James to get 15 minutes, the pressure for him to deliver a good story was immense. He knew I was actually very passionate about data storytelling, and I really wanted him to succeed. So he came to me to do a dry run. And what I saw was not something for the level of the managers. It included multiple projects he did. He was explaining unclean data in detail, complex techniques step by step, a lot of unfinished analysis, all the rabbit holes he went down, not to mention the visualizations that did not follow all the principles that I had outlined before. It was definitely not something for the level of the managers. And after his dry run, I asked him, I was like, James, what is the goal of your presentation here? And his answer hit me. And he said, Adrian, I just want to show how smart I am. And I just realized that I make this mistake too. And as data folks, we all think data is so exciting. We want to share all the cool techniques that we do, the robustness of the analysis, all the little nuggets that we find. But in doing so, we lose the message. Now, what young James did wasn't wrong. He did what is called exploratory data analysis. And when you're working with a bunch of when you're in a working session with a bunch of experts, it's okay. I liken exploratory data analysis like mapping out the areas of a new lands, and your experts are your fellow cartographers. Now, the managers, though, they need what is called explanatory analysis. So, in your work, you've mapped out the lands for them, but really what they care about is how to get from A to B. So, you might be very tempted to tell them about the Iron Hills that in the corner here, or this like Mirkwood forests. But if it's not along the path, they don't care. So, how do we tell a story? And that is by asking these 3 questions: the who, the what, and the how. And most importantly, you want to ask these in this order. So, the first thing is the who. And we can all learn a thing or two from product managers because that's the question that they're always asking is, who is my customer? As data people, it's really important to put on the product manager hat and know the consumer of their data products, whether you're doing some analytics or even publishing a machine learning model. So, my tip is to always actually write down who that person is when you think about this. Put it on a piece of paper and just put it up as you are doing your work. The what? And I'm going to take a quote from a novelist, Truman Capote. And he mentioned, I always write the ending of everything first. I always write the last chapters of a book before I write the beginning. Then I go back to the beginning. I mean, it's always nice to know where you're going from, is my theory. This is where the previous point we could take a page from product managers. This one, we can all take a page from novelists, filmmakers, and screenwriters, and just thinking about how do we like write that ending first, right? Where do we want to go, and having that as our guiding North Star. Finally, the how. And you want to be very selective with your data and visualizations on top of practicing the principles that I have mentioned. You want to make sure that each one that you're presenting is moving you towards your ending, because the last thing you want to do is write loose endings to your story. If anyone is a fan of The Expanse, there was a massive, like, kind of side story that went nowhere, and I've seen a lot of data presentations that kind of write loose endings like that as well. So let's talk a little bit more about what I do now with these in product operations. So in product operations, we have three pillars here. So we work with business and data insights, customer and user insights, as well as product processes and practices. And you could definitely see how, the first two is very data heavy in working with quantitative and qualitative data, but as well with processes and practices where we're trying to scale our product managers by providing some of the tooling in terms of even like experimenting. And you can imagine, as we're experimenting on products, how a lot of statistical skills come into play. So, how do these three concepts help me today? Well, in the data literacy sense, when I came from oil and gas into banking, I just discovered this huge world of data and terms that I did not understand. Everything from banking products to payments. But I was no stranger to seeking out experts and asking those questions. D- Data visualizations. So, if anyone's ever worked with product managers, they have a tough job and they are extremely busy and they need data at their fingertips fast. You can make their lives so much easier if you can visualize your data correctly, or so much harder than their job already is. And lastly, data storytelling. And this is my favorite part of the job because our data is usually related to somebody on the other end that is using our digital products. And being able to tell the story of that somebody is really exciting. You get to tell the story about their pains, their fears, their hopes and dreams. And in the end, just really make the decisions on your product that add value to the person at the other end. So, to conclude, whether you're just starting your data journey or you're even a veteran data scientist, just know that the learning never stops. So, I don't use Excel today anymore, but there's still lots of Python toys to learn, machine learning techniques to understand, but The most important skill is actually connecting data and people. Today, I've only actually just scratched the surface, and I do know I saw that there was a comment referencing a book, and this is a book I highly recommend. I keep a physical copy for myself. It's like my Bible for data visualizations, and I highly recommend this if you want to go further in depth than what I have talked about today. And I have provided you a summary of a screenshot of everything I've just talked about today. So feel free to screenshot this and reference it whenever you need. These three fundamentals I talked about today, I'm still mastering. There's so much data that I'm always seeking out the experts just to ask the right questions, pushing the boundaries on how to visualize data, and always how to tell a better data story. So remember, these three skills, they'll take you a lifetime to build, but you can take them with you no matter where your career journey goes.